This is the Kitchen Sink WP Podcast, episode 315.
I program my home computer.
We have a server crash, 404 error, page not found, links aren't working, system is crashing, system is crashing, system is crashing.
Your old HTML website, barely alive. We have the technology. We have WordPress. A new website, better than it was before. Better, stronger, faster. We have the technology. Why, hello everybody. This is Adam Silver, the host of the Kitchen Sink WP podcast. Thanks for being here. Let's get started. All right. First and foremost, upcoming events. We have one WordCamp next weekend. WordCamp Lancaster, Pennsylvania, March 14th, single day camp, and it looks to be a good one. And that takes us right into the news, which is all relevant about WordCamps and events in general. As you may be aware of, there is a virus called COVID-19, otherwise known as coronavirus. And in the news, it's a big deal. WordFence has put out a bulletin indicating that they're stopping all travel for the rest of the year or until further notice. They will still sponsor the WordCamps that they're agreeing to, that they're on, that they committed to. Godaddy has at this point stopped travel to WordCamps and events, as are many, many other companies. And Josepha Haden also released a statement, as she is the executive director of the WordPress project, or the foundation, about WordCamps, and that right now it is up to the local communities to kind of follow suit based on their cities and towns' feelings, etc. So that said, I am leading WordCamp Raleigh this year, and we are on the fence. I'm on the fence. I don't know. It's a tough one. If you're supposed to be traveling, if you're going somewhere, it's take precautions. Wash your hands, as they say, etc. I'm still heading to Southern California in a few weeks for spring break, take my kids out there. And I was supposed to be going to WordCamp Santa Clarita and speaking, but that has been canceled. So they decided to cancel theirs. And at the moment, I do know that Houston is still going on. I'm a mentor for them. And I think Kansas City also canceled. I was a mentor for them as well. So that's the news. The coronavirus, the COVID-19, it's a big thing out there. People are very leery and afraid. I totally understand that. And I was just on a plane last weekend. I went to Miami WordCamp. It was fantastic. My wife travels every week. They're taking precautions as well over on JetBlue. Airlines are reducing overall flights because of reduced demand. So it hits us in the bottom line too. So hopefully this will be getting better. It doesn't get any worse. Like I said, take care of yourself and do what you need to do. Make your own informed decisions. All right. Anything else? Oh, yeah, one more thing in the news. In case you missed it, I didn't realize this until after I published last week's episode. Last week, episode 314, marked exactly 6 years since I had launched this podcast. The website was up for a while prior to that. I hadn't gotten the podcast going, but 6 years consistently every Monday. So I was pretty proud of that. So in case you missed it, happy birthday to me, to the podcast. So there you go. All right, moving on. Segment 2, the meat and potatoes of this week's show, DevOps and WordPress. So this week I want to talk about things a little geeky, though I'm not sure I can get much more geeky as this is a tech-related podcast. But anywho, this week I'm talking about the term DevOps. Now, the term itself isn't all that new. I mean, it depends on what you consider new. 3-4 years. Is that new? I don't know. But let's go with the definition of what DevOps is first. This one came from Amazon, of all places. DevOps is the combination of cultural philosophies, practices, and tools that increases an organization's ability to deliver applications and services at high velocity, evolving and improving products at a faster pace than organizations using traditional software development and infrastructure management processes. This speed enables organizations to better serve their clients, their customers, and compete more effectively in the market. Okay, that's a lot of words for definition, in my opinion. So we're going to dive into this a little bit. Again, not get too technical, but still kind of geeky. And that makes sense. There's a tie in here. There's also some other terms that are related along with this. CI and CD, which stands for continuous delivery or continuous deployment. And we'll get to that in a minute. And there are, of course, a bunch of tools that can be used in the arena, and they should be used, and we'll get to those as well. So the reason for my interest in this lately, and to share with you, stems from a couple conversations I've had recently with some companies about their services and their product. And it got me thinking, what's the place for DevOps in WordPress? Is there a place? And the answer is yes. So in the past, a long time ago, like 15 years ago, which is ancient history in technology, 15, 20 years ago, companies had IT departments, and they worked in a certain way. There were two teams of people. Team one would focus on creating things, applications, internal systems, websites, i.e. developing. Keep that word in mind, developing. Team two would maintain the hardware, the infrastructure, the operations of those things. And that's the key word there is operations. And we merge those two worlds now. And merging those two worlds back then was tricky at best, and it still can be. Oftentimes those two teams were at odds. And the term DevOps comes into play from them. We're merging those two things. And it's where the two teams working with open communication, collaboration, and integration that can really help a company overall. So you ask, how does this come into play with WordPress? Well, on the dev side of things, companies that want that CD, that continuing delivery, that continuous delivery of a product or a service, they want those new features and updates, and to make sure that the site itself doesn't go down ever. 99.9% of availability and 0% downtime or disruption. Companies want that CD, right? Like I said, well, it sounds easy, right? I mean, okay, we could just go get a server and it makes a total sense. But let's say you don't want to have a standard brochure site in this area. Let's say in this case, we're going to use multi-site with 100 or thousands of instances, or even a WooCommerce store. That adds complexity. The operations, the ops, a part of DevOps, helps ensuring the smooth sailing of these two things, because you have the developers developing iterations of software, and now you still need things to consistently work. So how do you implement DevOps in your world or your agency? Well, from my research, and perhaps where I might be going with my own world here, comes down to a few requirements. And it's pretty much just like, there's a lot more I could peel the onion on this, but these couple things start off the thought process here. It's about trust and buy-in. You need to understand the DevOps cycle. So you need to build. So real quick, the cycle is this. You build, deploy, test, release, and then repeat. And everyone on the team needs to understand that this will be an ongoing and, in theory, never-ending cycle. Because if you're going to be adding features and functionality to your service or software or product, especially in the development stages here or in technology, this will always be happening. Nothing's going to be remaining static for too long. So trust and buy-in has to happen from the entire team, both teams, okay, both sides of it, making sure that you understand this is going to always be happening, okay. And then you need to use tools consistently, and pick the right tool for the project and not overthink this per se. And first and foremost, it comes to mind is version control, maybe Git. And I'm going to talk more about Git in a future episode because, on a side note, I have something up my sleeve. Perhaps I bought a domain to go with it, but we'll talk about that later. But in this case, it's about the ability to embrace failure and learn. And that means many times in the future, things are going to break. And to get things back on track, we need to be able to undo. And that's where, using version control is really going to help. That's going to be the operation side of things. So making sure that both teams understand that we're going to iterate, process, and push stuff out consistently, continuously, and that something may break. So can these two teams work well together? Okay. There's also the concept of automated deployment, and on both sides, we're going to want to implement this in order to save time. So that's another potential area to go down. How do you automate these things? Maybe with something like Docker or Kubernetes. And those things I'm getting my head wrapped around still. Those are new technologies to me in my brain, and how these things work, these instances of Docker kind of things. So I'll talk about those maybe if it comes up in the future. If you have experience there, let me know. I would love to talk to you about it. So, and then lastly on all this, who runs these teams or this team itself? Is it the product owner? Is it the project manager? Is it a project manager? Is it a product manager? And then, of course, once you have that kind of defined out, you could split the conversation into how to manage that team with, agile management. You have a scrum master. But at the end of the day, the goal of DevOps is to increase the collaboration between developers, let's say you, and the IT professionals, the people running the server. And I think for right now, that's where I want to leave it. Just kind of start thinking about this. Like, is your company large enough to have DevOps? Are you wearing all the hats? Maybe it's time to split those things into two teams. And those teams have respective teams themselves as well. It just depends on where you are and what you're doing in the software or service that you're providing. Something to think about. Got me thinking. I've been reading a lot about this lately, so kind of interesting things to consider. So there you go. That's how I'm kind of connecting the DevOps into the WordPress space, and I think it's a cool conversation to have and to investigate down the line. All right, moving on. Segment 3, tip and tool of the week. This week's tip, it's actually it's a tool. It's a plugin. It's called Collapse-O-Matic. It's a plugin that lets you have the button that says, let's say, click here to show more. It's like almost like an accordion that you might find in a page builder, but it's text-based. I have it for a client site. I needed something to say show more for some more content. What's cool about this one is it shows the content back on the back end. Like if you inspect elements or inspect the code, that way Google will still index it. Collapse-O-Matic, link in the show notes. It's free, it's basic. It's been updated 8 months ago, 70,000 active installations, and it works just fine for what I needed it to do. So check that out. Collapse-O-Matic, pretty cool. All right, well that's it this week. If you have any questions, go ahead, send it in via email, adam@KitchensinkWP.com, or use the speak pipe function of the website. If you want to support the show, become a Patreon. If you want to send me a coffee, there's also buymeacoffee.com/kitchensink or something. I don't know. You can sponsor the show. There's a form on the website to do that. Thanks for listening. Now go out and do some awesome things with WordPress, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.